All right, good morning, everybody. I'm working off of my phone today because my printer decided to go on strike this morning. So here we are. You know, the machines are becoming sentient. So, my sermon today is Lost and Found, Seen and Loved. When Pastor Trent asked me to prepare a sermon for today, I'll admit I was feeling terrified. You don't know how well you know something until you have to teach it to someone else, or in this case, preach it. But I should have done the first step, which is make an outline. No, I'm just kidding. Which was to pray. And when I did that, God was like, "You're fine. You got this. You have a gift with words, so you're gonna be all right." So this parable, the parable of the lost son or the prodigal son, is the third in a trilogy of this part of Luke. The first parable being the lost sheep, and the shepherd goes out to find his sheep and rejoices when he has found it. And then the second parable being the lost coin that the woman looks for and sweeps all throughout her house. And of course, all centered around, finding the lost treasured object and around redemption. And I've always had an interesting relationship with the story of the prodigal son or the lost son, because I remember I went away to college, and then I came back to my hometown to visit my hometown church that I was going to when I was in high school. And the pastor greeted me one Sunday afternoon being like, "Colin, the prodigal son returns." I was like, "What?" It made me somewhat uncomfortable because I think he thought it was a joke, and maybe, I don't know, maybe a Christian joke or something like that. Um, but it made me think, like, did I do something to deserve that moniker? How am I the prodigal son? I was like, I'm a poor student away at college, so I'm not spending my lavish riches anywhere. And then, I don't know. I did also come out to him when I was a senior in high school, so maybe it was just me out at college being gay. Who knows? All right, so starting off in this story with this younger son. So he boldly goes to his father first and asks for his share of the inheritance. And then from there, the text gives us this to go off of. He packs up all of his things. He takes his inheritance to this distant country, and then spends his inheritance, or rather squanders it, with this wild living. And for a moment, I would like to imagine who this younger son was and think to myself, maybe, he wants to go out and just party it up and have fun and live while he can. Maybe he thought, like, I'm going to take this money and I'm going to make something of myself and go out in the world and do that. And I also think about the inheritance too. In the story, right, it's the literal wealth, and it could, in this story, be not just the money, but also, all the different things that the father would own, like livestock and, value of property and so on and so forth, servants and so on. And also, I feel like this wealth could also symbolize the gifts that we get from God when we go out into the world. It could symbolize the physical strength, maybe the son's handsomeness, maybe his talents even. And so he goes out to this distant country and just completely spends it all, right? And once it's gone, we have famine. So we don't know what kind of education he has, if he has any education at all, if he just does what his father did and that's all that he knows, if he doesn't have any other sort of skills or anything like that. But he's destitute, so he has to go out and do something so that he doesn't starve to death, and so he gets a job. And the only job that he can find is taking care of pigs. And clearly he wasn't paid very well because he finds himself daydreaming of eating the carob pods that the farmers fed to the pigs. And of course also no one would give him any food. And in the context of a famine, that makes sense, right? The whole country is reeling from this famine, so people are probably closed off and guarded. It's like, I don't have enough to eat, so why would I give you something to eat? Especially like you're not from around here. Um, but also, it's like he's gone to this place where nobody knows who he is. He doesn't have those connections. Or if he did have connections, maybe they were just tied to his wealth. And once that was gone, so were all the friends and the hangers-on and the entourage, so to speak. So everybody, and everybody's trying to survive off the food that they have, what little they probably have, and in addition to that, they still have their livestock to feed, sheep, goats, calves, pigs, etc. So there's nothing extra for this man. He's starving, he's cut off from his support system, and the only choice left then that he has is he has to go home. And I love this phrase, he comes to his senses. It's just like one day he wakes up, and I can relate to that. I think that if I imagine, this young man's life, he's probably trying as best as he can to hold on to what shred of pride or dignity he has left, because he just spent all of his money, and is like, I'm going to make this work, and I'm going to make this work, and I'm going to make this work, and wakes up day after day, goes to his bed hungry night after night, and at one point it probably just breaks him. And he's just like, I cannot do this anymore. And what he realizes is that he remembers his father's servants and how they always have enough to eat. They never lack for food. So, sounds like a pretty good deal. And I also want to acknowledge the humanity of what he does next. He starts to rehearse the speech. You're all laughing, so you all know what I'm talking about. I know this speech well. I'm sure that at some point we've all rehearsed this speech, this speech where, okay, I screwed up and now I've got to go home and take responsibility for all the screw-ups that I've done. And to, breathe more life into this scene, I also thought about the father and how hard he must have worked to not only save up to provide for his family, his servants, his farm, but also to have more than that, to have an inheritance to even give his son in the first place. I read an article somewhere at one point, this is the internet, so take it with a grain of salt, that a lot of Americans don't even have enough money in their accounts right now to cover even a $500 emergency. So to me, I'm just like, wow, somebody saved that much money and wealth. And this father worked hard, right? And this son spent the whole thing on this wild living. So what's this wild living? Parties, wine, women, right? We never know what the details are, except for the older brother who kind of rats on him at the end. And I'm going to get to that. And so in this moment, we could think cynically of the younger son a little bit and say, he's a deadbeat. He's falling back on the only thing he knows what to do, which is to run back to his daddy and ask for more money, more food, etc. But putting myself in his shoes and being in that situation at several points in my life, I also imagine that shame that he must have felt. And not only just the shame, but the regret, because he had all this money and he has nothing to show for it. He has no land, he has no family, he has a job, it is a job, and is still worthy of something, but not enough to support himself. So he's made, in a sense, nothing of himself. He has nothing. I have nothing to show for myself. I have a terrible job, terrible pay. But I don't want to be cynical. I don't. I'm the eternal optimist. And I believe that the younger son knows he's messed up, and he's repentant, and he is ashamed and sorry, because when he's rehearsing his speech, he says that he doesn't even want to be his father's son anymore. He is just only he is content to just be a servant in his field and just have that be that. And yeah, I know, because I feel like I've rehearsed this speech several times in my life, as I mentioned. And I feel like this speech is one of those kind of mental walls and barriers that we build up in our heads too, where it's like, if I talk so badly about myself and make myself feel so guilty for all the terrible things that I've done, that I am the worst, I am the scum of the earth, then the shame that is going to be heaped on me when I go home or when I face the situation that I need to face won't be as bad because I've already beaten myself up mentally and emotionally and spiritually and all that stuff. So he prepared the speech, and then he sets out on his way. But we got to give him credit because he's doing a very difficult thing, which is to go home and say, like, I messed up, I'm sorry, I am nothing, please just give me a job, and that will be enough for me, and I'm good. And when he gets close to home, his father already sees him from a long way off. So we're still setting the scene, the theater of our minds. I feel like that meant that he was watching for him. That, he was on his porch, his stoop, whatever they had those days. It's your own theater, right? You can imagine it however you want. But he was waiting for his son. He was sitting there waiting for him and hoping that he would come home every single day. And then he sees him, and he is so excited to see his son, he jumps up and starts running to him. And so we have the first sighting of the prodigal son. And being seen is going to be another one of my themes today, so bear with me. In this moment, the son only sees himself as a failure, and he can't see past that, right? He cannot see past his mistakes. He cannot see past that failure, that shame, that regret of having lost everything and having to trudge back home. But when the dad sees his son, again, he starts running, and he hugs and he kisses him. And, he probably saw how his son was dressed. He was like, you didn't leave home with that on. Where are your sandals? Where's your whatever, your jewelry, your accoutrements? And the father could have started it on him. Where have you been? Why don't you call? Why don't you text? Why don't you write? A little bit anachronistic, I know. Why are you dressed like that? And so on and so forth. But no, he just loves on his son so deeply because he is that happy to see him. And of course, we got the son starting in on his prepared apology speech. And one thing that is so beautiful about this text is that he can't even finish it, right? Because he had the whole thing, and we got to see it just now. He had the whole thing, and he was going to say, I just want to be a servant and work in the fields and so on. But he just gets to, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. And his father stops him. And it overwhelms me to think of a love that powerful and to think of somebody that is that happy to see you and, doesn't care how long it's been, what you've done, so on and so forth. They're just that happy to see you. And so he's so overcome with the love for his son, he calls out to his servants and tells them to put a robe, a ring, and sandals on his feet. And not just any robe, his best robe. Now, I did some research, which is the same thing as internet sleuthing these days. Joke. And so the robe gift would have been reserved for the most honored guests. So here in this moment, the father is showing his son that he is not, the worst, the scum of the earth. He is somebody of honor. He is special to him. He gave him the ring. A ring would have symbolized authority. So the son was putting himself already in the mindset and the place of that lowly servant, but instead the father gives him a symbol that says, no, you're not this, you're this, You are my son, my flesh and blood. Um, and then the last gift was, of course, sandals. In my internet searching for this sermon, I saw some sources say that in that time servants did not wear sandals, and so that would have, but only people of honor, so that would have like elevated the son in that sense. However, there were some other sources that stated that in that time all people of all classes wore sandals, right? But one source I read stated that in that time, men would make the sandals for themselves, and they would also make it for their family members. And I wasn't there, so I don't know how accurate this is, but I really like that idea that it's not just that he's giving him these sandals to make him a person of authority. It's, I make these for my family, and I'm giving these sandals to you because you are still my family, you are still my son. And so his son feels seen. And in our modern day parlance, right, feeling seen can be a quick, quirky catchphrase. Like when you're watching a video about how much you love your dogs, and whenever you're around your dogs, you have a million nicknames for them, and you put on a special dog voice, like, "Who's a good boy?" I'm Pastor Trent's doppelganger, if you haven't figured that out. I also have dogs, so that makes sense, right? And you say, I feel seen by that video, because it like so accurately depicts the truthful experience of your life, and you're like, I feel seen. But I feel like there's this deeper meaning to this story and the deeper meaning behind that phrase, to feel seen. Because the son sees himself one way, and that's the only way that he saw himself up until the point where his father saw him and made him feel seen. Say, not only are you not this lowly servant, you are my son, you are my family, and I love you. So now it's party time. He tells the servants to slay a fatty calf, and then comes the older brother. And I can also relate to the older brother. Because he has been working in the field all day long, right? And it seems like he's been working the whole time and being a good and faithful son while the younger one was out doing whatever. And he hears this party going on at the house, and of course the servants are saying, yeah, it's because your brother's back and we're celebrating and he's safe and sound and lost and found. And the older brother has a very human reaction, which is he throws a temper tantrum. An understandable one. The screw up comes home, and daddy's all about him. He's all over him, right? And so the father, of course he has his temper tantrum and he refuses to come inside. And so the father comes outside even begging and pleading him, like, please, come on in, your brother's home. And I feel like we could relate to this upset from the older son, especially those of us with siblings. Because the older brother, he's saying in so many words, I've done everything right. I have been with you in the field, day after day, following your orders. I want to follow in your footsteps. The older son is probably doing things like his father. He is contributing to the farmland. He's probably building the wealth and his own and increasing his own inheritance while working with his father, learning the business, learning how to take care of the livestock and the servants, and all of these great important skills that he's going to need when his father is no longer with him. And the father never even gave him a goat to celebrate with his friends. And then he also, like I said, rats out or calls out his younger brother and says that he spent all of his time with prostitutes. And it kind of makes me wonder, how did you know that? I'm sure that probably word may have drifted back to their homeland eventually, like, oh, have you heard what your brother's up to? Have you heard what your son is up to? But, I mean, it is a potential plot hole in this story. I read a quote somewhere, though, that plot holes are just places where you can fall in and you can kind of fill in the rest of the story. So that's what I'm going to do. If we could imagine the story happening today, I could see younger brother like texting him, being like, hey, look what I'm doing. I'm at this party, I'm at this concert. Or he's on social media like Instagram, like click, click, and posting all these selfies and all these videos and things like that. And so the older brother is fully aware of all of the crazy antics of his younger brother. And although there is sibling rivalry, I feel like there's also a sibling code where it's like, okay, I'm going to see all the crazy things that you do. I'm not going to tell dad because I'm not a rat, but, until, of course, the very end when he's having his temper tantrum. So anyway, but it's such a human story because I feel like it's a trap that we could all relate to and that we all can fall into. The trap of being judgy with your siblings, the trap of this feeling so unfair to that older brother. I've been doing everything right and you reward the screw up. And the older brother refusing to come in means that he also refuses to see his younger brother. And when we talk about this feeling seen, right, it's like the younger brother saw himself one way. The father sees him with just pure love and acceptance and understanding. And the older brother can't see past that's the screw up. And it blinds him and cuts off the love that he has for his brother to the point where it's like, I don't even want to go in there. I don't want to celebrate this. Like, what is there to celebrate? And you could see that as being blinded by the righteousness and judgment and indignation and anger and bitterness. He didn't ask for his inheritance early. He didn't even get so much as a small, like, here you go, thanks son for doing such a good job. Here's a goat to celebrate with your friends. All that he would have wanted. And so he can't see him with the same eyes that his father does. And I think, we could all relate to that in that moment. There have been times I know when I've been so overwhelmed by that bitterness and that anger and just kind of want to shake your parent and be like, wake up, like, this is ridiculous. They're just going to go out and do it again. Not always rational thoughts, but human thoughts and human reactions to what's going on. And then we get this powerful message from the father. He says, son, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and alive again. He was lost and is found. And this very human story shows us the power of that redemption and the power of God's love in our lives and through Jesus. That unconditional love, which is mind-blowing. How many of us can say that we have loved unconditionally or that we have been given that 100% unconditional love by other people on this earth? Because we know God gives it to us, right? But experiencing that from somebody else that we know, family member, friend, even a stranger. And so this younger son is talked about as being dead. And of course, the dying could be, as we say, the dying from sin, the wild lifestyle, the not following, God's path for him and so on. But I think there's also a spiritual death because he was cut off from that source of love. He was cut off from the people that knew him and loved him, his family, his community, his friends from his country. And again, he was probably around people who only cared about him when he had the money, when he could pay for the drinks and the parties and the wine and the women and the greatness. And then when it goes away, the party was over and nobody cared anymore. Not even enough to feed him. And that feeling of just suddenly being all alone when you thought you had friends and you thought you had people that cared about you and loved you, but it just evaporates, hurts so much. And it's like they don't see you for the person that you are. It's like, yes, I had all of these wonderful things. I had this money. I had access to these parties. I could get you the great liquor and da 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 da. But there was also a person under there, a person who probably wanted to be cared for and wanted to be loved and wanted to feel acknowledged and feel like a somebody in this world. And so he didn't feel seen. He was cut off. He was invisible. But his Father, like our Father, sees him and knows him and loves him just the way he is, and in turn loves us just the way that we are. That redemption and that love feeds him. It brings him back to life. And it brings him back to the people who love and cherish him, so that he knows that he is still somebody in this world. And here's just a question to think about. If there's a moment in your life where you've ever felt on either side of that story, the one being redeemed or the Redeemer, have you ever felt like that father who missed that person in your life so badly, all you want to do is see them and just let them know, like, I love you, I forgive you, I just want you back? Have you felt like the younger brother who had everything to gain and squandered it all and had to start over from complete scratch and feeling just so ashamed and regretful and alone? Have you ever felt like that older sibling who deep down probably still loved his father and his brother, but just could not see past that anger and bitterness and resentment? And to conclude, I was listening to some worship music to get me in a good mind space, and I used to listen to a lot of Christian rock when I was in high school, because that's my church then had like rock bands and things like that. It was very energetic, and I would listen to a lot of Christian radio. So I was cycling through songs on my iPhone, and then the song from Phillips, Craig, and Dean came up. Mercy Came Running, and I just thought about the lines, the chorus, where that just perfectly exemplifies this story, right? When the sins that I carried were all that I could see, and when I could not find mercy, mercy came running to me, just like this father. And I feel like for this spirit of Lent and for the care that we need in this world right now, that's the kind of powerful love that can redeem ourselves and redeem the people around us to create a powerful and loving community that we all need right now. And I will close us with a prayer. Dear God, thank you so much for the power of redeeming love. Thank you so much that you are that Father who sees us with unconditional love, who sees us just the way that we are, sees past our jobs, our titles, our positions, our status, our class, and sees us just for the wonderful creations that you have made us to be. Help us to have that same love for the people in our lives, and to be open to always seeing people, situations through your eyes. In Jesus' name, amen.